Welcome, everybody. My name is Michael King. I'm a plein air studio painter, and I happen to be the founder of Artful. This is our inspirational interview with Joshua Been. For everyone that's new here, I just want to tell you a little bit about what Artful Minds is. And so Artful Minds focuses on the artistic development and growth. We do this through a variety of ways. Some are the skill development exercises that we have within the community, our weekly virtual office hours where you can come and ask me anything at any time, our monthly challenges, which are fun, our monthly professional critiques. We have their open critiques as well, inspirational interviews, our upcoming master classes. And so if you're interested, check us out at artfulminds.ca. And if you want to check out the community public aspect of Artful Minds, go to community.artfulminds.ca. And that brings us to the interview. Our inspirational discussion today is with Joshua Been. He's an American impressionist whose inspiration is finding the balance in the elegance dance of light and form. From painting plein air studies to larger studio works, his brushwork and palette knife together create the impressionistic quality of implied detail without overstating it. In addition to that, his entrepreneurial skills shine as a gallery owner and a creator of the highly popular Day Tripper easel. Welcome, Joshua. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I hope that audio sounds good. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
That sounds amazing. I appreciate it. So I'm going to just scroll through a selection of your work. And while I'm doing that, if you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself, that'd be fantastic.
You bet. Well, one thing that's kind of unique about what I'm doing with my career is that I have my own studio gallery in a little small kind of touristy mountain town in Colorado. And so that enables me to have a little more of the sort of reins of my career, so to speak. I think that actually helps a person have an avenue to the market. And by having that avenue to the market, you're continually painting, chasing empty walls. You set up your life where your gallery has enough tourist foot traffic and you price your paintings where you can barely keep up with that demand, and then you're chasing these empty walls. So it's a good way to go. It keeps you working constantly, and I just really enjoy the aspect of travel, painting on location, and then bringing that visual vocabulary, life experience, memory, and also brushwork, shorthand, and sort of speed and effectiveness that you get only from plein air painting to that studio easel where you can really explore these, different compositions and that kind of thing. So this is a great little slideshow here. It's just bringing back so many memories. So many of those were painted on location. And as a painter, you can almost get right back into that time of day, the season, the whole experience.
Yeah, that has to be one of the best things about plein air, I think, is whenever you go through your older paintings, you can remember the weather, you can remember the day, you can remember the bugs, the friends you're with, et cetera, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's jump into this. And there's so much I want to talk about. Whether or not we get to it or not, it will be a different story. I mean, I got so much on my list here. So you're a huge prolific painter, without a doubt. You're probably the painter that I follow that paints the most. You're also a gallery owner, and you have a business making easels and a variety of other stuff. But let's start with your artwork, okay? So one thing I have here is you're very open and knowledgeable regarding your painting, pricing, and selling, right? From what I can tell by reading your book and also your Instagram videos, etc. You even have a plein air painting video out there where you share everything. All are jam-packed, full of great information. I've linked to the book in the chat if anybody wants to try to read it online. You can purchase it or read it for free online. Either one's yours. And because of how much you paint, though, I'm curious, like on a plein air trip, how many paintings can you put out in a day or an entire trip?
Yeah, there's a lot there in that introduction. Thank you very much. I do paint often, and I paint a lot, and I paint quickly and effectively. And I think when you're out there on location, doing like a road trip or a plein air event or a backpacking trip, all these different styles of adventuring and painting together yield different results for sure, and for different reasons. On a backpacking trip, I might do 6 to 8 paintings a day, and that's sunrise to sunset. Of course, you're backpacked in there, 5-6 miles, and you're painting these little tiny paintings, one right after another, kind of sunrise to sunset, and you're accumulating a ton of photo reference the whole time as well. Taking pictures, you have different ideas while you're painting one painting. painting, all of a sudden your foreground will drop into shadow from a cloud moving by, and it changes the whole idea. It changes the whole motif. And, you make the decision on the spot if you're going to chase that idea or kind of stick with what your original intention was. But at the very end of it, you're taking pictures of all of these ideas. And so you can come back from a trip like that and just have an enormous amount of reference material and then a really nice little 6 to 8 painting a day body of work. And then say on a Pleinuary event, I'm known for doing upwards of 20, 25 paintings in that 7-day, 5-day, whatever painting period. And it's honestly not that crazy when you think about it. You're basically up at sunrise, you're knocking out one before most people are getting coffee. While people are getting coffee, you're already out there, so you might as well get another one done. So then you go get some breakfast after you get 2 done. And then, the midday stuff maybe looks okay. You can go maybe get one done after like a late lunch or like kind of an late breakfast, early lunch. And then you've got the whole afternoon into evening. You can easily get 2 done in that amount of time, sometimes 3. No, so it just depends size, how complex the scene is and stuff like that.
Yeah. And how far do you wander from your initial location when you start the one in the morning to be able to make so many other paintings throughout the day?
That's a good question. If you know the area, like when I show up at the Grand Canyon Pleinuary event, I know that canyon backwards and forwards. I know all the good outlooks. So I have a plan almost every day, depending on what the weather's doing and, what I'm feeling for the day, but I know the time of day and where it's going to be good. And you almost get that dialed in, and then you spend less time with FOMO, right? Fear of missing out, driving around the next corner and the next corner. Oh, it's going to be this is going to be awesome. That can eat up a lot of time. So it depends on if you're a noob or it's your first time at an event. You're at a great disadvantage to those people that know the area and know where exactly to go. So you can get a lot of work done in those. Best Pleinuary events are the ones where they might have a really nice showing of your best work, 2 or 3, 4 paintings of the best work all week. And then they have a whole other section where you can mill through the rest of those paintings, those 20 something odd other paintings. If an event doesn't allow for people to look at those other paintings, I think they miss out on a huge amount of sales because people love to kind of go through and find their little treasure, So anyway, but that's, we can go into plein air protocol later if you want. I got all kinds of comments about that.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's been a huge part of my meeting the market for sure. All of us artists, we have to meet the market some way, and plein air events are a really good way to meet the market. I argue that having your own studio gallery is the all-time best way of meeting the market, but also the tent shows. People can be super successful in the tent shows. I think those are too weather dependent for me to get really excited about them. You set up and a huge windstorm comes through and blows down everybody's stuff. I mean, it can be pretty hectic, but you can also do really, really well. So that's one way. But yeah, it all comes to that in order to perpetuate this deep study. And that's what we're trying to do. It's not all about, just cranking out paintings and making tons of cash at all, right? It's about like taking, just being able to go have that time with nature and try to paint it. It's a profound experience. And then if you can inspire some people on the way, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect statement. Now, going back to how quickly you paint, I mean, it's inherent in who you are, though. So even for your studio works, I mean, I've watched you on Instagram lives and you still paint really fast. It seems like you could paint a 24 by 36 in a couple of 4-hour sessions. But let's take a look at the one behind you. That one's, I think you said 5 feet by 10 feet. And I'm curious, how long would have that piece taken you to paint?
Well, I don't want to break your heart or anything, Michael, but it's way faster than that.
Jeez.
This painting.
You're killing me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this scene, I've painted this scene, you'll see on my website, I've painted this scene, quite a few times. And, you can never paint the same scene twice, really. Even plein air, going back to the same spot, same time of day, it's always a new experience. That painting in total was probably 10 to 12 hours, but there's no guessing game. I'm not stepping up to that blank canvas like, I wonder what I'm going to, where I'm going to drop a cloud shadow or whatever. I just go headlong into it, block in like the big lighting statements, light and shadow patterns. And then I try to try to build out the painting to a certain satisfactory level. And then I start to really get analytical into the composition and looking for where exactly the viewer, both where I want to guide them and where they're likely to go for information, right? And by knowing that, or by having a really good guess at what that's going to be, you can put premium information in that area. And then all the other areas that are similar get a pass. They get an implied finish almost.
Yeah, they're there just for context.
Right. Yeah, they're supporting actors. So, and almost if you were to take every area in the painting to that high finish, you're sort of detracting from the information. It gets to be a little authoritarian, like, no, this couloir is exactly like this. And this little snow shape is like this. And this 48,000th leaf over here is exactly like this. And, I think as painters, we want to imply that detail. We want to give high proficiency in a certain area, super big punch, and then let the rest of it be implied by the ability you show in that one area. And it's almost closer to how we see it in real life. In your peripheral vision, it's all just sort of loose shapes that's based on your spatial, orientation. And then your eye is bouncing around to certain areas that you're interested in as your spiritual being in that time space.
Yeah. So that must really just make it a little more freeing for when you're painting, because this section over here, this section over here isn't really the star. So as long as the values and the edges are right, you're good to go and you can focus on what you need to. That's kind of the mentality, right?
Exactly. You get that painting to a sort of satisfactory level everywhere, where the lighting is clearly depicted, that there's no ambiguity anywhere, but yet it's simple enough where it's not over rendered anywhere either. That's where I think where you start to contemplate and dive into the psychology of the painting and where exactly that viewer is likely to look and what exactly you want to say with the painting. You might, you could even sort of almost like counter direct the viewer down a different path. You sharpen up something that brings their attention over to a certain area and balances out. I mean, it gets really esoteric, but largely intuitive. And the more you paint from life, I think the more you build that sort of loose painterly shorthand.
Since we're getting into the little more intricacies of painting, I watched one of your Instagram live videos that you have there. You can check them out on Instagram if you're there. Just go to his reels, I believe. And nice. One of them you talked about putting in your darks, because we're all taught into very early stages putting your darks first and followed by the mids and the lights. But you had one specific area where there's shadows in the rocks, and you said, don't bother putting in the darks, because what happens is your mids go over the dark and it changes their shape. So you're better off really just putting in your mids first and then your darks. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's an order of operations thing. And I don't do that every single time. It's basically when the painting calls for it is the time to do it, right? And knowing the signs or knowing the motif that sort of directs that approach, I think is probably more often than not what you're kind of going for when you're pre-visualizing your painting. And I always recommend that before you start a painting is sort of just visualize quickly in your head. If you don't pre-sketch, I think pre-sketching is of course like the best thing for really breaking down that translation quickly. But if you don't pre-sketch, even after you do pre-sketch, pre-visualize the process. And there's likely going to be areas that are going to be easily tarnishable by subsequent passes. The anecdote that you were talking about happens all the time. And I bet you all of you that listening know exactly what I'm talking about. When you draw in a complicated rocky structure and you're drawing in the shadow shapes and you're leaving the light blank canvas. It's almost very Notan like. You're leaving the white canvas as your lit areas, right? And you're just stoked and everything's, the shapes are so fun and it's very gestural and strong. And then you go in and you paint the light shapes around, chisel around all that dark shadow that you just laid in. It's amazing. And you screw it all up so bad that now you got to go back in and chisel back your shadow shapes. And then it's this battle, the light and the dark battle, right? And you're going to end up overworked. You're going to end up in frustration. The better way to handle that order of operations is maybe do a very loose, quick outline sketch with maybe burnt sienna and a little ultramarine blue and terp. And so you're drawing with something very leaned down just to kind of visualize the light and dark pattern, the shapes that are going to be out there. And then you might even wipe off the blank canvas. So you see like a ghost image of what you want to do. And there's hardly any pigment left on the canvas. Then you put in your light shapes where they need to go, and you can sort of overshoot the light shapes just a little bit so that they scooch over into that shadow shape just a little bit. You're laying down that light pattern on top of a very lean and wiped down ghost image drawing. Then you go in with your shadow shapes and you chisel those in just like you would in your block in, and your light is already there. You chisel in the sky behind it, and boom, you could be done with the painting. And it's fresh, and it has that gestural thing that you loved by doing the no tan block in, the other way.
Yeah, and you keep the great edges too, right?
Yeah, you keep those beautiful spontaneous edges. Try it. Go out and paint kind of some kind of scene that you see behind me, some kind of rocky thing where there's really strong light and shadow patterns. The scene behind me is backlight. So that rock has like that back kind of rim light thing like right there. In this scenario, this is the best scenario for that order of operations. If you're painting front light, I think the best order of operations is to drop in your shadow shapes and then make them overshoot into what is going to become the light shapes, and then drop in your light pattern over the shadow shapes. That order of operation is better for front light. So yeah, it just depends on the motif you're going for, backlight or front light. That's a great question. Order of operations is clutch for speeding up, creating just work that looks more effective and deliberate. And, it's chess. Ultimately, you're trying to think out, you visualize the potential pitfalls, and you try to avoid those. And the best thing you can do almost is get a little information training from some books, from some groups, from like this kind of interaction, and then just go outside and try things and be okay with your own discovery. And that discovery, you'll come up with solutions to depicting challenging subject matter that is yours alone.
Yep.
Painting on location is what I recommend all the time for so many reasons. One, you're outside, it's healthy, you get some sunshine, you get a hike in. Worst case scenario, you come back and, your painting isn't that good. The best case scenario is you had a great day, you hiked into the, great outdoors, it's never going to be a bad situation. So it's always good. And then you're always learning out there. Mother Nature has a way of throwing the perfect curveball for your specific knowledge. And it's quite amazing. And it's self-correcting in that if you're out there faithfully trying to create the illusion of what you're seeing, then it's sort of pass fail. It's a self-correcting mechanism where you just keep evolving towards creating a better illusion of what you're seeing. And you'll do it in a variety of ways, as long as you don't get hung up on different methodologies. Or, most people in a painting class are going to tell you, no, Joshua, you do not put your lights in first. You put your darks in first, and you're getting that over and over in art schools and painting classes and stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know. Let me try this and see how this works. I'll be darned. It revolutionized my backlight paintings. It works because the shadow of a backlight painting is going to have a whole bunch of corruption in it anyways, right? So it's the lights that you want to keep careful and highly uncorrupted and full of vibrancy and warmth and juxtapositions of a little warm and cool to keep it vibrating. And you don't want to be doing that on top of something that's corrupting at every brushstroke,
Yeah, for sure. Sure. And I think you bring up a very good point there is, just because these things have been said over and over again and they have validity to them, it doesn't mean they can't be done a different way, right?
Right. Yeah. And what's neat about oil painting in particular is that it's basically forever forgiving. If you don't like what happened, you're unhappy with a certain passage, scrape it off, start it again. The more you do that, the better you're going to get at fixing errors and noticing problems, being able to correct those earlier on. And, before you know it, an hour is about your average time on a painting. I would say like the 12 by 24s, I'm not rushing through those, but they're probably about an hour and a half usually. And I try to find compositions also that aren't gigantic fields of view, right? If you think about how big of a field of view you're going to paint, you're not, it's hard because, right, the first time you go to a place, trying to think of a beautiful place up in your neck of the woods, Banff or something, right? You're going to get your easel out. You're going to be like, I want to paint. Yes, it's so beautiful. Yeah. And you realize really quickly, you're never going to be able to capture that on a canvas. You have to pick and choose your compositions and try to say one bit of the poetry out there instead of all of God's green earth. All of God's green earth is also cake, very postcardy, very big shape and stuff like that. But it's just going to be complicated. There's going to be a lot to those paintings. And it's almost always what you do first whenever you arrive at a place, right? You're like, and you paint the All of God's Green Earth painting. And then you're like, okay, I got that one done now. Yeah. Now I can zoom in and paint this motif and that motif and this motif. So I recommend trying to go to a place and spend some time with a place and, get to know it and try different things. But anyway, the larger field of view you're taking in, the more complex and complicated you're going to have foreground, middle ground, background. You're going to have all these different materials and all these different tiny value families and value keys and stuff. So those are more complicated paintings.
Oh, for sure. I love open-ended questions, man.
Yeah.
Now, you previously talked about visualizing the scene, and even this postcard scenes, they kind of correlate to my next question in terms of you coined a phrase, I guess, called 3D-izing. And
the 3D maps.
Yeah, so what some people don't know about you, I'm sure, is that you spend a lot of time in the gaming industry doing 3D modeling, so you understand mesh maps and everything. So I'm going to show my screen, and these are captures off of your book that you have on your website, throwing this 3D-izing of the scene. And if you could talk about it a little bit, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, you bet.
There we are. Here's the first one.
Okay, so this is a super, super helpful way to kind of build your own understanding of how linear perspective works. And in this visualization, I think it's really good because it's very much like a wire mesh frame on a level in a video game. But it's every one of these starts with the horizon line. And the horizon line is stemming from your eye level in the scene, in the surrounding world that you're in. And so you project your eye level out into the world, right? And so each one has that horizon line. And then the horizontal lines that are out there are elevation lines, as if you went up 10 feet. And then that same line is hashed across the form. So that's that's actually like probably the third step in this. The first step, of course, is the horizon line. Second step is actually looking at where form is overlapping form in the most simple sense. So the thing in the most foreground is that bit over on the right, exactly. And that is overlapping the next big cliff face. And then that is overlapping the next thing. And it goes all the way into where things turn a corner and you don't see the overlapping anymore after that. So you basically get the horizon line and then the overlaps. And then you build the horizontal elevation marks on those forms. The vertical marks are meant to illustrate the fall line, where if you were to take a bowling ball out there and roll it down any one of those cliffs, how would that fall? It hit this, go down, fall down this, and that's the vertical marks. And then sometimes the vertical marks, like say in that distant sort of roundish hemisphere shape, that one and the one right above it too in the distant, yeah, that right there, you'll see that's kind of like a big sort of sphere placed inside the geology in a way. And that can help understand how this works. You can build simple, these don't have to be these real complex scenes like this at first. If you want to try, just take a golf ball or a ping pong ball or some sphere you might have in your house, a beach ball or something, and take a magic marker and draw circles that go around the sphere in the same distances apart. So you have like a sphere with lines that go around it like this, and you can hold that sphere above or at your eye level. Zoom out a little here. You can have it like at your eye level or above your eye level, and you see how those circles on the outside of the sphere are interacting with your eye level. And that is a great premise to start with if this is a kind of a new concept. But also just going through, yes, exactly that right there. Going through old art magazines and stuff, you can basically do this with every single painting, even if the horizon line is outside of the painting. Like if someone is looking obliquely down at a subject, a still life, a lot of times the horizon line will be outside of the painting, either above or below it. But often it's the horizon line is above the painting subject matter in the scene that is painted. And so in that case, there's still going to be form that's interacting with the horizon line, even if it's not in the scene. And that can be a little confusing for people, but trying these little 3D maps on people's paintings, you'll quickly realize, oh, okay, yeah, this is looking down at something. This is looking up at something. Those trees you see some artists do, looking up at aspen groves and stuff like that, and looking into the sky. Those can be fun to do this with. The horizon line is, of course, at your eye level. It doesn't look up with you. It stays at your eye level. And so the horizon line is a reference to other horizontal planes in nature, or especially you'll see more indications of standard 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective in cityscapes, urbanscapes, things of man-made structures and interiors and stuff like that. You'll have entire areas that are square and level, and all those are pertaining to linear perspective. Yeah, it's a fascinating endeavor, and it will build your understanding of the form in a profound way. And that's exactly how Google Earth maps their three-dimensional, their Google Earth. It's all based on elevation and a satellite picture. And so if you think about that, it's just exactly the same thing. It just gives you insights into how that translates. Ultimately, we're translating from a basis of a horizon line and how that's relating to level bodies of water and so forth like that in the landscape, especially. I think if you translate painting either from a photo even, or especially outdoors on location, where you're translating 4-dimensional space-time basically onto a 2-dimensional canvas, I think it really helps to sort of understand how that linear perspective works, so you can translate quickly and effectively without getting bogged down with weirdnesses like your plane of water starting to lift up, or wonkiness and things like that. When you start to understand linear perspective, it's the cure for all of that wonkiness.
Yeah, and once I saw your 3D-izing idea, I went out, and it's helped me immensely with two things: making sure that my water plane is correct instead of coming up like this, kind of raising your perspective. And it's helped me a lot on rocks. I'm still not a master at rocks, but it's really helped me understand their form. And throwing in a rock now with 4 strokes of paint is a lot easier than it used to be, just because you really understand what's going on. So I would highly recommend, if you want to look at your scene in a 3D way, or even taking your photos, right? Print them out, take a Sharpie, right? Absolutely. And just trace over them. It makes you understand everything so much more.
Yeah.
Thanks for that little synopsis.
Let me show you this other part in the book if I can find it real quick.
Oh, for sure.
This exercise here, I think is really, really good. Let's see if I can put that up there. It's on page 55. And see, it's this basic wireframe sort of amphitheater with a circle.
Yes.
What you do with the circle is you indicate where the lighting is coming from. So if you just look at that, it's like a moon phase, right? You can tell exactly where the lighting's coming from. And then you translate that lighting onto the amphitheater to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your ability. And it's just a great exercise in understanding the shapes and patterns inherent in that three-dimensionalization of the form.
The more you do it, the more mistakes you make, the better you get. And over time, you really start to understand it a lot more, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And it brings a sculptural quality to your work. I never recommend, in fact, I I kind of rip on it a little bit, but the methodology where you grid off your photo reference and you grid off your canvas, there's really no limit to that. It doesn't teach one how to translate the three-dimensionality of the subject matter in a way that's sculptural. So it's problematic in your development in learning to draw well, but it is very, very effective. If you have a commission and you need to get it done and you're having a hard time, that's an effective way to translate that stuff over quickly. But I don't think it's any better really than like projecting stuff up on your canvas. It's all legal, do whatever you want. But if you want to, it's not teaching you to draw well.
Yeah.
This methodology of the 3D mapping teaches people the things that they need to be learning about form and about the three-dimensionality of the space that you're creating. And then your paintings start to take on this feeling of immense space because it's like a sculpture on a canvas instead of, just pigment on the canvas. So
that's right. So that 3Dising is more really about understanding form and being able to draw it, whereas the grid method is just making sure a line is close to this corner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you could take that grid to the nth level all the way down to the pixel, and it ultimately just turns into a pixel by pixel translation, right?
Yeah.
So it's just not teaching people to draw well. It's effective, and you can get some applause for sure on Instagram and stuff like that for that kind of work. And it's all legal. Like I was saying, I'm not knocking anybody. This is a hard craft to make a living in. And, people got to do what they got to do. But if you want to learn to draw well, I think it's really inherent. It's imperative that you understand how your eye level is influencing everything that you see. And that's the foundation for linear perspective. And it's really where all this information comes from in that 3D mapping.
Yeah, good. Great advice. Great advice. At this point, we're going to open up the questions. The first good question I see is, do you pay much attention to how your technique evolves since mastering your craft? Or maybe in other words, is there something that you've made recently that might have been beyond your ability 2 to 3 years ago?
Thank you for that. I feel like the mastery is a hard one because we're all just trying to evolve to be better than we were yesterday. And sometimes you achieve that, and sometimes it seems like you're looking at a body of work and it's not where you'd like it to be. It can be there's can be some frustration in there. I think at first, when you're first learning to paint, you make major strides quickly. You fairly, like I would say, within 100 paintings, you figure out a lot about lighting and form and shadow, but you got to plow through a bunch of stuff expecting to just nosedive a few, and then you'll have a breakthrough, and it might be that the whole painting is a complete turd, but there's one overlap that you just love, right? And it's like that, what I was saying about going out on location. It's a pass fail, and you just try to get more passes than fails, and eventually you get 90% passes, and every painting you could look at in 5 more paintings and be like, God, I've learned so much since then. And all you learned was how to do a branch better on a tree or something. At first, it's these massive strides, and you're learning so much, and it's awesome. And then eventually your improvements are these little micro mark making, just tiny honing little things. It's, or you'll be a little rusty and you'll throw just a ridiculous tangent in your painting where, the back mountain comes up and hits the very top of a tree or the top of a house or something. You just have to laugh at that stuff because, we're just flawed spiritual beings trying hard to get how amazing this existence is.
Yeah, exactly. Now that's interesting. You mentioned that mark making. And so I want to just bring up this one photo and like, I don't know how large this painting is, but I noticed for a lot of your larger paintings, your dibs and dabs on your canvas to represent these trees are just that. They're dibs and dabs. So how important is that little bit of mark making to your work?
Yeah, it's huge. This is a 3 foot by 3 foot, so it's pretty good sized piece. But yeah, you can say so much with really thought out mark making and shapes, like some of those patterns in the trees down there. It's sort of like this, you guys from Canada, you guys will know the Canadian Shield, almost like this glaciated granite rock that goes out into these lakes and stuff like that up north of Minnesota and out into the East Coast. This is what you're going to get in these alpine lakes, this sort of glaciated, rounded rock. And then the foliage on top of that are these keenly designed shapes. Each are trying to help describe the form underneath. So it's like each shape is orchestrated. Each area is clearly either in light or it's in shadow.
Okay, so you're using the trees to actually shape or say what the form of the land is then as well then.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the trees, and then you see that sort of low line or sort of lower grassy sort of tundra. Yeah, those shapes even help describe the form. Yeah. And then the brush strokes help describe the form. In mark making, one of the best things you can do is that 3D mapping that we were just talking about, because by understanding the fall line and also contour lines, those can be really informative as far as like how you want to handle your mark making and brush strokes. A lot of times painting big rocky, cliffy, structural stuff that's crenellated and ins and outs with a lot of delicate light and shadow, it can get a little busy. So you want to try to simplify in some cases, and then other cases you want to try to really articulate and model out those things. And it all depends on if that area is one of those spots where the viewer is likely to look for that kind of information. Wherever they are going to look for that information, you have to give it to them in spades and satisfy their question, like, is this painter good? And then they look at those spots and they're like, yeah, and then everything else could be, chaos. Yeah. But it's those spots they're going to look. If that is just fun, interesting brushwork, painterly mark making, but it stops them in their tracks, they got to look closer at it. You've done your job.
Fantastic answer. I love it. Thank you. Another question came in. How important is considering foreground, middle ground, and foreground? Or does all that work itself out with the linear perspective and their overlapping shapes?
The foreground, middle ground, background, knowing where those overlaps are is part of the first thing that starts to make this 3D mapping make sense. You realize how much power there is in just really accurate shapes and their contour. If you can even do like blind contour where you're looking out there and you're like, okay, with that thing's overlapping that, you almost have to move your head back and forth to see the parallaxing motion out there at times if it's really close in value. But, if a shadow face is in front of a shadow face, but if a shadow face is in front of a light face, of course, that's going to be a more definitive overlap. But anyway, you're going to find those overlaps, and you'll find just through overlaps alone, there's a three-dimensionality to an outline drawing. And that's very interesting in terms of edges, right? So edges really shine in the overlaps of form. And so you're really thinking about, with overlaps, that's one of the crucial places people are going to look for information. They're going to look for information in a lake scene along where the water meets the land. So if you screw that up, your painting is no bueno. It's never going to be good unless you get where the water meets the land perfect. So that's a spot where they're going to look. There's just other things in the painting where they're likely going to look for that stuff. But the overlap is for sure one of those information gathering things. When you're looking, just hiking on a hike or whatever, you're looking at those overlaps thinking, okay, I'm going to have to climb up over that or this, or I'm going to go around this big form of a mountain. Those are information gathering spots. In a painting, you immediately lose that parallaxing motion when you stop and you start translating. So you want to try to increase that. You want to sort of almost create a parallaxing motion in your overlaps, if you can, by the mark making. So the backdrop of a strong landscape overlap, like say where that rock is overlapping the background, those strokes in the background want to be done and finished before I start making the rock, so that the rock overlaps them in a way where they feel like they're just off in the background.
Yep.
If you go up there and you start futzing with that edge, you're going to make it look like you futzed with that edge, and that overlap doesn't feel strong, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like almost sometimes you see people painting in the back mountain over top the front mountain, and so now you can see there's contouring.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to repaint the overlap in order to get it right again. So that's kind of the importance of overlaps. And overlaps is an edge element, part of the visual language. In my book, I break down the visual language into 4 elements, and it talks about value. Color is part of the value element. Shape is where you start to get into linear perspective and what is important to include in your shape language, how much, the balance, the steel yard, all that kind of stuff is really pertaining to the shape language. Overlaps is where you get into edges, and then brushwork is mark making is the texture element.
That's
and
right.
Especially in oil painting in particular, you'll have textural qualities to flatter mediums like acrylic painting, and watercolor and stuff. You'll have texture elements to that, but oil painting actually has physical paint quality that sticks up off the canvas, and that paint quality adds to the illusion a lot of times. So in water effects and things of that nature, the vertical brush strokes will have almost a different value than a horizontal brush stroke in the gallery lighting. And so if you can plan out how that's going to look when somebody's walking in front of your painting, looking at your painting, the water will shimmer. It'll look like it's like, breaking the plane, and it comes alive. And that can only happen with actual mark making and the physicality of the brush marks.
Good answer. I love it. Love it. Thank you. Another one came in, and I guess it's kind of related. I don't know if you saw it as well, but what valuable lessons do you think you learned about painting that is unique to oils and acrylics and physical media in general compared to digital painting? Subnote, do you do any digital painting?
Yeah, I did a lot of digital painting, and I still do. I love the digital, of course you got the undo button, you've got endless layers. So it kind of makes painters that don't actually know how the tactile paint works that well. So I feel like the best visual development artists out there, and those are probably the highest paid artists on the planet, the visual development guys that are working at the elbow of directors in Hollywood and stuff, and they have mad painting from life plein air skills, and they can light a shipwrecked thing for Pirates of the Caribbean or something, and make it into this thing. So the digital is an amazing art form, but it can create, I think, some crutches for artists that want to move into oil painting. So the best thing, I think, someone coming into oil, there are very much similarities, especially if you embrace the opacity of oils. In my book, I taught there's a couple of ways I think to best come into oil painting if you're moving in from different mediums. But basically, embrace the opacity as soon as you can. Paint with a limited palette. I think the 5-color limited palette that I recommend is titanium white, cad yellow lemon, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. And the burnt sienna is an extra to the Kevin McPherson limited landscape palette that he recommends. But I think the burnt sienna is worth throwing in there because you can lean it down and you can do beautiful sort of sienna kind of monochromes without using white at all. And you get these really, really nice sort of reddish tones and stuff like that. The darkest you can go is the burnt sienna, which is fairly dark. So, and then if you want to go into the next thing, I think is to go embrace opacity by adding white and just go white and black basically, or white and blue and burnt sienna. You'll get a whole gray thing going. But white and black is a great way to start learning how the opacity of white works with color. And then just working with a limited color palette, those 5 colors, try to do the next 100 paintings in that limited palette. And you will learn so much about color. And the biggest thing that you can learn, I think, right off the bat is that there are a million means to the same end in color mixing. Every color has all 3 primaries and some amount of white, and then you have a gray that you can just bend anywhere you need. If it needs to go a little cooler, a little redder, a little bluer, a little more, yellow or something. And it's interesting. We were talking about this the other night. My wife and I are both painters. Red has a very narrow spectrum where it can be like red barn red, right? As soon as it goes into shadow, it's not red anymore. It's like some purple version of red plus dark plus sky influence or something like that. Red rock is the same way. Red has a narrow spectrum in the value range. You can have dark, deep red, but it's not the red that you think of when you think red, fire engine red or something. And then yellow can only exist in like the first 2 values, and then it starts to bend over into orange or green. So yellow is something different in the shadow altogether. A good exercise for color mixing, instead of color charts, color charts, way better and more applicable, I think, is get a bunch of objects of the same primary color. Get a bunch of yellow objects, get a bunch of blue objects, get a bunch of red objects, get a bunch of purple, orange, green, and paint those objects of one color, set them up, light them, paint them, and you'll see all the nuance of all red objects in their shadows. And, yellow is fascinating. You realize, wow, there's like very little yellow in this yellow painting. It's all green or orange or some bent shadow version of it.
Man, I love that piece of advice. I wish I would have talked to you like 15 years ago. Saved myself a lot of time.
I wish I had me when I
lot
was
of
first
ink.
starting.
No doubt.
It's
so funny.
It's a great endeavor. You just keep learning and learning and learning.
Yeah.
Whoever masters anything, and who decides who's the master. People look at my work and be like, it's unfinished. It looks sloppy. It's to me, it's this careful balance of spontaneity and an illusion from a little distance. I want that to spark someone from 15, 20 feet away in the gallery and be like, whoa, and then go look at it and be like, wow, this is a train wreck up close, Oh,
that's so funny. And I get that kind of leads me to one of the questions that I have is, when do you know when you're finished? For myself, sometimes my brush is just hovering and I realize that I'm hovering and maybe I shouldn't be doing anymore. How about yourself? Do you have a set plan in your head that you know it's done, or just all of a sudden you're done? What happens?
A little all of that. Yeah. I mean, it's ultimately this cost benefit analysis, because it gets to this point. I think I took this workshop with Kim English. He's a great American painter, and he does all these beautiful Italian street scenes with figures and stuff and umbrellas and stuff. Wonderful painter, wonderful teacher. And his adage was, a painting will get to a certain level where the next stroke might increase accuracy, but at the cost of spontaneity and directness. And that's where it is, that cost benefit analysis. Do I love this brush stroke underneath that I'm about to, fix? Or do I just leave it and be like, okay, it's kind of fun. It's rough. It's raw. It was my best attempt at the poetry of this, thing. And, some stuff comes off and it's absolutely magic, masterful. My favorite painter, and I think the GOAT, is Richard Schmid. And he's a testament to, a 15-minute painting just being an utter masterpiece. And it's all just that right practice and muscle memory and ultimately just complete and total understanding of and fluency with visual language.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a good piece of advice right there. And I want to say, not that I trying to sell your book, but the best thing about Joshua's book is he actually has it online for free. So if you're willing to just read it off your screen, it's there for you to read. Of course, you can still order one, but the amount of information in there, I find for me, it's one of the best books I've read. Just there's like 3 or 4, and that one's on my list just because it has so much great information. It's practical information more so than theoretical stuff. So definitely give it a read. Now, saying that
Thanks
is,
very much, Michael.
oh yeah, for sure. It's helped me immensely. One of the things as well, I watched one of your plein air instructional videos that you have, and that was very eye-opening for me as well. Even though I've seen other videos you've had on YouTube, you really break down and explain a lot, which I think is fantastic. Saying that though, are you going to ever make another instructional video?
I plan to make a whole video series that accompanies the book. I'm working on the 5th edition right now, and this is going to be the edition that actually has the Library of Congress ISDN number and all that
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
There's a whole lineage of these things. This was the very first one, and it's like this little 40-page staple binding pamphlet. 2011. This guy.
Oh, okay. I was wondering about that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But there's
That-
information in there that I still have in the new book. But yeah, it's just a fascinating, ever evolving knowledge base, I think. And ultimately, painting just gets people outside. But yeah, you can check out the book on prolificpainter.com, and it's free up there. It is purposefully a slight pain in the butt because I want you to order one. Right. So, but it is free. It's there. You can page through it and everything, but it is a clunky, purposefully clunky sort of interface because of course, like look at the information. You trust me, you will be blown away by, the knowledge and the understanding that you can gather by getting into that book, and then also coupling that with, getting outside and knocking out paintings and knock them out with no regard, right? Like for the next 10, 15 paintings, just put a timer on and do 6x8s, 3 in an hour. So you get 20 minutes for each one. And they're just going to be warm-ups before you get on whatever project you already are on. Just do it. Trust me. For the next 10 painting sessions, just knock out 3 4x6s, actually, not 6x8s. Those are too big. 4x6s. 20 minutes, set up, get the 3 photos you're going to do beforehand. So you're not, at the end of the timer, you're not looking for a next photo or whatever. Get 3 of them dialed. You're going to be dialed about this exercise. It's going to be doing little drills. You set that timer, and the timer sets up the same kind of urgency that you get when you're plein air painting. Yeah. You're chasing that light. Everything's changing. That sense of urgency you get outside is really hard to duplicate in the studio unless you're faithful to that timer and you set it 20 minutes, go. At that bing, you stop. You might just even throw that painting away. And just what I mean is just go plow through these drills. And at the end of it, you're gonna be like, I feel better about, the strength of where I'm blocking something in, or the form I'm trying to get with the lighting. And because you paint with a little bit looser abandon, so many people get hung up on the photo and needing to be perfect. And it's a sign you need to get outside and paint more from life. Or if that's impossible, it's getting pretty cold up there in Canada. It's getting pretty cold around here in Colorado as well. But set a timer and you get that exact same kind of urgency behind what you're doing.
Great advice. Great advice. And so one of the last questions from those attendings, and I think it's a good question. Are there exceptions to eliminating this pre-sketch depending on the weather and the time? Yeah,
I would say so. I mean, pre-sketch as long as you feel like it's beneficial to you. I haven't pre-sketched in a little while. You probably noticed that in maybe the last year or so in my Instagram videos. But also my time outdoors is gotten a little bit leaner with a new child and things going ups and downs over at Prolific Painter and stuff. So it's always a challenge to get outside, and sometimes I either forget my sketch box or it's a scene that I'm just familiar with and I'm not going to see that much benefit out of it. But yeah, I'd say, it all depends on how I always think it's a good idea. Every time I do one, I have a better painting in the end. And it's just, you think through the composition and stuff. Ultimately, you can do a quick sketch on the canvas, pretty fast as well. So it's not the end of the world if you don't get to do a pre-sketch, but I do recommend it, and it will enhance and catalyze your growth as a painter and keeps your drawing really, really sharp. And doing those 3D maps, I mean, shoot, go knock one out before bed tonight. Just grab your old art magazine and a Sharpie, start with the horizon line and the overlaps. Get on Prolific Painter and check out the book. It's under the educational tab. And then you can bring up the entire lesson, and it just goes through step by step how to do it.
Perfect. Great advice. 3 more questions for you now. We're near the end. So
Okay.
First one, I'm going to put you on the spot, and it just has to be a yes or no. It doesn't really matter. Are you going to be doing Pleinuary again to the 2023? You are. All
Yep.
right. I'll get
I haven't got my
ready.
prompts all figured out yet, but yeah, we will be doing Pleinuary, and it's a little fun contest. Tell your friends about it. It's basically just to kind of get people out. To be eligible for the prizes, you have to create a 9-pack of paintings that have prompts. I kind of go through on the hashtag Pleinuary and the @Pleinuary page on Instagram. First couple posts go through exactly how to set up those 9-pack things and how to submit and stuff. And I actually do check. I want to see everybody's 9-pack of paintings before they're eligible to win a day tripper easel and stuff like that. So I want to make sure you're out there doing it. I'm not super hardcore, but I don't want any cheaters. I want people to, go out and do it. The people in the Southern Hemisphere got it easy, right? They're out there in summertime. You Canadians are hardcore. I think I had more Canadians do it than anywhere. And
Interesting.
they're out there in like 20 below.
Wow.
I couldn't
See,
believe it.
that's what the exchange rate will do for you. It gives us perseverance.
It's incredible. And, just getting
Yeah.
outside and being in that sunshine or whatever
Absolutely.
condition. And we've got some new products and ideas coming out with the day tripper. You might have seen our all natural day tripper that we have now instead of just all black. Those things are sharp. In fact, I got a new fly on the wall and a day tripper. It's been a while. My last day tripper probably has 1,000 paintings logged on it. Yeah, they're just, there's no planned obsolescence in these things. You buy them and they just last forever. They're kind of military grade Pleinuary easels.
I'm going to, I think, get all my panels ready.
Nice. I need to make it more. I need to kind of
No.
crack the whip a little bit. Lazy people trying to get 9. No, I'm just playing it. You got to fit it in your life. And
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to try to get 18 done. Yeah, I'm going to try to get 2 entries in this year for sure. That's
good. To do those self-portraits too, aren't those?
You bugger. That was a tough one, but thank you.
No,
throw that one in the mix.
They're like, but you got to do them. They're so good for you.
Yeah. And okay, so the last 2 questions, and these are kind of becoming the norms at the end. So what's the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
My mom always says, visualize, actualize. And everything from, diving off a diving board to, doing some snowboard trick or, mountain biking stuff. And especially in the painting world, you visualize the process, even if you don't visualize every brushstroke through the whole thing, that would take, almost as long as the painting, right? But you sort of visualize the process, you play through that process real quick. And it doesn't take long, and you can really figure some stuff out. Visualize, actualize. That's from my mom, and I gotta say I probably use that every day.
That's fantastic. That's not an answer where I expected it to come from, but that's fantastic. Now, this next one has to be a little bit different if you can, though. But what's the best piece of advice you could give an artist?
Okay, so I was saying earlier, do for the next 15 sessions that you're going to go, you're setting aside time to go to your studio and paint. Before you paint, set a timer for 20 minutes and do a 4x6, and then set that timer for 20 more minutes, do another 4x6, set that timer, do 3 of those before you start painting, and do it for the next 15 sessions or in perpetuity. You'll find, first of all, it's so fun and liberating, and you're going to try stuff that you don't care about. So you have this already this artistic license about it. It's like freeing. It's so liberating. You're going to fall in love with the process so much that you probably won't give it up. And then also those paintings can be gifts to collectors. They can be gifts to family and at Christmas time. They just turn into the little gifts. You just give them out. You're knocking them out every time. So you just have them all over the place. And the ones that are little gems, you might keep those around your studio space just to kind of be like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. Because out of those, eventually you're going to have some gems, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. You might look back and, you like that one little tiny overlap of one of them, but it's still, you can be on top of the world from that one little success.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The micro accumulation of skill is a massive source for joy in the human experience. And whatever endeavor you're into, if it's golf or painting or fly fishing, just those micro skills that you start to accumulate are just put you on top of the world.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for that. All right.
My pleasure.
That pretty much comes to an end. If you want to check out Joshua, you can find him at joshuabean.com. You can find him on Instagram. His handle is just Joshua Bean. And of course, you can check out his Where Are Goods, his book, and his Day Tripper easels on prolificpainter.com.
Yep, prolificpainter.com, all one word.
Absolutely. And that's where you can find out about Pleinuary if you go onto Instagram.
Yeah, Pleinuary, just a hashtag Pleinuary, and it's Pleinuary.
Perfect.
My
And
pleasure.
of course, if you want to check out Artful Minds, go to artfulminds.ca. And the public part of Artful Minds is community.artfulminds.ca. And with that, Joshua, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I know we could talk for another 2 hours, but we got to end it. So
have me on again.
Big thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'll take you up on that, guaranteed.
Sounds good, Michael. Thank you so much.
And thanks to everyone who attended as well. All right. Cheers, everyone.
Bye, guys.